General Hickey, you've earned the gratitude of this nation for what you've done in uniform and the work you're trying to do. You knew when you took this job it was a hard time and it was a hard job, and that's why you took it. It would have been easier to have retired after a groundbreaking career, and for that I'm grateful. And you also know, like I know, is that we're part of organizations that we get judged on the organization over individual merit. And if you think you've got a tough job, we've got one to do it too. But that's okay. That's the way it's supposed to be. And that's why I do bring up, and I do want to make note, this note, to me, is more than just a note in a bathroom. This is a tangible example of the cultural problems. And this note and the disrespect shown to these staffers, this was not an ignore the staffer. This was ignore the people of southern Minnesota's 1st District. Ignore the people of the 8th District of Pennsylvania. And this attitude, they were doing exactly what I've said here, encourage them to do. Go out and investigate for this committee so we could get data and prove it, be welcomed in there. And I can tell you, imagine if you're a congressional staffer going out to find information, imagine how intimidating it is to be an employee who tries to say what's right. And you heard these folks come forward, and it's just heartbreaking to me to hear folks who are trying to make it work to choose in there. So I know this troubles you. I know deeply, and I want to ask this question. You come from a successful career as a general officer in the United States Air Force. Does the Air Force work better than the VA?
Congressman, every organization, every large organization has those people who are all in, as I use the words with my employee, who do absolutely everything right to the absolute max of their ability. And every organization has people that don't. And so you watch things that happen in my former beloved Air Force, and you're watching things that happen occasionally in my current beloved VA. I love them both because of the missions they do and because of the great people who participate in them day in and day out, working their tails off to make a difference for this nation.
And maybe, Ms. Halliday, maybe you with the General can together chime into this. This is not unusual in a large organization for the disconnect between the 40,000-foot strategic vision and the granular level of somebody doing the work to have somewhat of a disconnect. But I would make the case that the lack of a national strategy and a clear mission up and down is causing this to see that. Do you see the disconnect when you do your work?
We do see some disconnect with that. I think you have to have very clear policy guidance. And I think some of the fast letter guidance that has gone out has really hit the core values of some of the staff in the Veros. And that's why we're getting all the allegations we're getting today. I think you have to be very clear on your policy. You have to understand what the intended consequences are and the unintended consequences. You have to deal with both. When I personally went up in Philadelphia to take a look at the issues up there, and when I met with the Deputy Undersecretary for Benefits, they said they did recognize that a misapplication of the guidance was a risk. And time again, my problem is put in the controls if you recognize it's a risk. And I didn't see that. And
General
I think
Hickey
that we have to work very hard.
Does she have the power to make those changes?
She has the power and is responsible to put the controls in place. And I think that's where our oversight can help VBA the most.
Tonight I was fascinated by this because General Hickey, and I said again, knowing you and knowing you want these changes and knowing how personal it is to you, you mentioned that Ms. Rule's suggestion came up and warranted change, and she didn't know that and didn't know it went down. That seems to me to be almost why that wouldn't happen. And I almost half facetiously asked, did she get a bonus for making those changes? Because the issue here is you've got employees trying to improve the system, trying to make it, and there's such a disconnect there that those things never connected.
So, Congressman, everything we are doing today was an employee initiative. It was an employee who said, segment the work, do it according to these ways.
It's amazing how disenfranchised they felt, though. And would you say, and that's just my last question, was that panel an anomaly, or do you think that's a fair representation?
Congressman, I would refrain from, because to me, that would feel like, if I made a comment like that, that would feel like I was being disingenuous about the real feelings that they had, and I won't do that to my employees.
Well, in all fairness to you, I am out there enough to say I would say that's fairly typical. Just so you know, from my perspective, that the expressed concerns were fairly typical of what I hear out there, whether they've spoken out whistleblowing or just confiding on the side conversation. I yield back.